Good evening, and welcome to Public Allies New York presents S2PP, a dialogue on dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline. My name is Tamdji, and I am a public ally at Community Resource Exchange, and I will give a few opening remarks. We are thrilled that you are able to join us this evening. Public Allies, an AmeriCorps program, advances new leadership to strengthen communities, nonprofits, and civic participation. Since 1992, the program has been developing a new generation of diverse leaders and promoting innovative leadership practices that meet the demands of changing times. Each year, public allies are placed into groups and must undertake a team service project to address a community issue. My team, also known as Team D.O.N.A, an acronym standing for Dreamers of New Avenues, selected to focus on the school-to-prison pipeline. We wanted to play a role in dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline by raising awareness in communities most affected. To that effort, we have organized a panel to gather multiple perspectives on this issue tonight. You will hear directly from the panelists themselves, but we thank them in advance for their participation. As a team, we have spent months in preparation and countless hours reading articles from sources that are on the front line of this issue. Members of our team have attended a talking transition for the new de Blasio administration on education and incarceration. We have done a community mapping in Harlem, a community most affected by the school-to-prison pipeline, and met with Manhattan Legal Services, attended a Solutions Not Suspensions event put on by the Resiliency Advocacy Project, and attended a criminal justice conference at Columbia University featuring Angela Davis, Fania Davis, and Beth Ritchie. The statistics are staggering. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world, with over 2 million people in jail. Mass incarceration has changed our world and disproportionately affects communities of color. According to Brian Stevens' TED Talk entitled, "We Need to Talk About an Injustice," 1 out of 3 black males between the ages of 18 to 30 are either in jail, prison, probation, or parole. Many have been funneled into the criminal justice system due to zero-tolerance policies and punitive school disciplinary codes that treat minor infractions at school as severe criminal offenses, thus enabling the school-to-prison pipeline. But this pipeline must end. Frederick Douglass, former slave and abolitionist, spoke succinctly when he said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." The school-to-prison The school-to-prison pipeline is breaking our young Black and Latino men at an alarming rate. This should not be so. Instead of instances of crime, restorative justice measures should be sought out first. In the words of Fania Davis, when we seek reconciliation to society rather than the deepening of conflict, true healing can begin. We hope that you will be empowered by the discussion you hear tonight and also pay it forward by educating others about this issue. Thank you for partaking in a dialogue that we hope will yield fruits of healing and justice in our communities. At this time, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Matthew Miller, Manager of Education, Strategy, and Research at United Way of New York City.
I can't, really express how important it is that we recognize that we are here because of your passions and your desires to really foster a better life for all New Yorkers. And Public Allies as a group is an entity that really just represents that passion, that hard work. Many Public Allies have been here at United Way throughout several years. Many of you work in other facilities around New York that we also work with. But Public Allies is something that is a leader in the change and really just kind of epitomizes what United Way is trying to do. So I really want to acknowledge the work that Public Allies has done in United Way and throughout all of New York City as well. I'm here to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Johanna Miller. Ms. Miller is an advocacy director at the New York Civil Liberties Union. She's not only an expert in youth and incarceration, she authored New York Civil Liberties report, Education Interrupted, the growing use of suspensions in New York City's public schools. She is also a leading litigator defending youth and changing policies on all levels. She is co-litigating BH versus New York City, a federal lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of school safety policies and practices in New York City, as well as having primary expertise in school-to-prison pipeline. She also has expertise in race-based policing, student rights, and gender and LGBTQ issues. Please welcome Ms. Johanna Miller.
The acronym. Excellent. Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I was asked tonight to set the stage for a conversation about both the impact of the school-to-prison pipeline and what we can do to change it moving forward. So I just want to jump right in and share a story with you that came to me in my very first year at the NYCLU over 6 years ago, that I have hanging on the bulletin board in my office and read almost every day, or at the very least I see the picture of this student every day. It's a story that motivates me, and I hope that it will motivate you. So Billy was a smart 8th grader. He had really good grades. He was the youngest sibling of 8, and he was the only boy in his family. So he had a lot to live up to. His sisters all did very well in school, and he just couldn't wait to join the 3 of them who were still in high school when he graduated 8th grade. On his very first day of 9th grade, Billy got lost in the new high school and didn't know what room he was supposed to go to for his first class after going to the school breakfast program. He was stopped by a school police officer who took him to the dean's office for being in an unauthorized location and skipping class, and he was suspended on his first day of 9th grade. Over the next several months, Billy was suspended 30 times during his first year of high school, each one of them for any number of mistakes or accidents or just misjudgments on his part that every 14-year-old makes. But Billy's mother had a disability and was on oxygen and it was very difficult for her to leave her home. And so she wasn't able to join him for any of the parent conferences that were mandated every time he was suspended, which meant that every time he was suspended, there was no adult ally in the room with him to plead his case and to try to find a better avenue for him. Altogether, he missed 89 days during his freshman year. He was so distressed, he was so committed to his academics, and he was so distressed about falling behind that Billy actually reached out to a community organization and went every single day after school, even when he wasn't going to school, when he was suspended, he went every day to study and work. The organization did academic testing on him and found that he was reading at a college level when he was only 15. But he could never catch up because he just kept getting pushed out of school. While he was suspended, one time Billy was actually arrested for shoplifting snacks in a 7-Eleven. At that time, he should have been in science class, but he wasn't because he was suspended. As a result, he spent 30 days in juvenile detention and he was put on probation. One of the requirements of his probation was that he attend youth meetings every week, group meetings with a facilitator, but because the bus in his neighborhood stopped running at 8 p.m., it couldn't get him home after the meeting, so he missed several of the meetings and was locked up 6 more times while he was on probation for violating by missing meetings. At 16, Billy dropped out of school. He lost hope that that institution had anything to offer him or that he could make his way through that school. At 17, Billy was arrested and tried as an adult on drug charges. So this is a true story. Billy's actually was a student in Michigan. This was a story that came to me from the Michigan ACLU affiliate. It's not a New York City story, but that story happens everywhere. It's happening across the country, and it certainly is happening here in New York City. The school to prison pipeline is not about a giant traumatic event. It's not about maintaining safety or reducing risk in school from violent outbursts or dangerous kids. It's about a chain of small indignities and uncleared hurdles that just make success impossible for some kids, even kids who are as promising academically as Billy was. The school to prison pipeline, the phrase, was developed by advocates to describe succinctly the process by which children who struggle in school are directed down a path to the criminal justice system. It's a description of a shortcut, an accelerated process that leads children down a road that very few can escape from. It describes what we know about school discipline and school police. Students who are suspended even one time are less likely to graduate than their peers. Those who are arrested in school or have to appear in court are as much as 4 times as likely to drop out. Dropouts are more likely to use drugs, have poor health outcomes, and more likely to be to encounter the criminal justice system at various times in their adult lives. That's the school to prison pipeline. It's a shortcut from promise to a dead end. So what does the shortcut look like in schools? Well, institutions like schools, courts, police rely on this shortcut when the longer way around is too remote, too complicated, or simply unclear. Schools and educators have been told for so many years that they can't handle kids that are difficult, that they can't meet these challenges, that they've forgotten how. It sometimes goes by the name zero tolerance. And zero tolerance means you don't get a warning. If you're in the wrong hallway on your very first day of 9th grade, we have zero tolerance. You are suspended. The appeal of that is that it promises to remove human error from the disciplinary process. But as we find out, it's actually applied in a discriminatory manner that has a huge impact on certain communities in our country. Zero tolerance has wreaked havoc on American education. Even as it has promised to save educators time and energy, studies have demonstrated that in schools with zero tolerance, educators spend more time on discipline than any other task. So here was a promise that this would be zero tolerance. You wouldn't have to use discretion. You wouldn't have to unearth the facts. You could just simply remove a kid from the classroom. And yet, now that it's been in place for a decade or more, we find that these educators are spending the most time on discipline of any of their tasks. Even as it's promised to be fair by removing discretion, data collected by the federal government and other bodies shows us that Black students and students with disabilities are far more likely to be suspended and arrested than their peers. In New York City, 90% of the students arrested in school are Black and Latino. More than 70% of the students suspended in school are Black and Latino, and that is the number of students who are suspended every year is above 50,000 in New York City. So it's not a small number. And even as zero tolerance has promised us safer, less chaotic school buildings, the theory you often hear, you have to get the bad kids out so the good kids can learn. Research has demonstrated that students do worse on standardized exams if they go to school in a zero tolerance campus than if they don't, even if they aren't the student who is suspended. So the theory that somehow you're paving a pathway for students to do better by removing the most difficult students actually falls apart under research scrutiny. So what has zero tolerance gotten us? Not much gain and a lot of loss, and it's created a deep rift between advocates and educators. The teachers' unions have taken evolving positions on how discipline can be handled in schools, sometimes asking for more police, for easier ways to get students out of school, and some, on the other hand, also recognizing the damage that does. Now, as many as 20% of referrals to the court system in New York City come from in-school arrests, things like food fights, insubordination, writing on a desk, even punching a classmate, which feels violent by definition, feels very scary. We have to wonder whether there are better ways to handle that kind of a fight and how it would have been handled 25 or 30 years ago, rather than taking the kid out of the school in handcuffs. So what can we do? The new administration has indicated its intention to reduce arrests and suspensions in school. Mayor de Blasio appointed a special commissioner just for this purpose. So we do have a chance, but the community needs to be heard. Young people, parents, educators need to tell the city that our schools deserve better, better than a shortcut. implementing limitations on the things that can land a student in handcuffs. This work is imperative. And the panel tonight is, you have an incredible panel who I hope are going to give you lots of inspiration in addition to sort of adding some of the imperative nature of this problem and sharing some of the stories with you. And so hopefully I have set the stage. I do think that we're in a really important and vital moment for our city right now. Other jurisdictions around the country are starting to turn it around on the school to prison pipeline, and it's New York City's turn. We're the largest school district in the country. 1 million school kids deserve better than a shortcut. And so I hope tonight we can talk about what ways we have to get around the shortcut, to make the process more inclusive and give kids a second chance. And that I hope that after you leave today, you as members of the community are going to tell the de Blasio administration and tell the leaders in your community that you believe that our kids deserve better. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the panel has to share with us tonight.
At this time, I'd like to ask the panelists to please come and take your seats up at the table. Also take this time to announce our fabulous moderator, fellow ally, Rachel Russell, who will be moderating for the night.
So just a quick change. Here at the NCJ, you would stand up. This is a fellow ally CJ who will be stepping in for Alex Davis. He is actually from the Resiliency Advocacy Project, and I went to one of his events that he hosted around the school to prison pipeline as well. So I'm going to ask him to come up and say a few words about himself so you can get an idea of who he is and what he's bringing to the table. He wasn't expecting that, so. Give it up for CJ.
Yes, good afternoon. As stated, I was not prepared for this. However, when I needed to help my people in need, I stepped up to the plate. Yes, my name is CJ, better known as Carrington Amey to the government. No, but seriously, I'm here today just to share some of my experience with you all, and also learn some things from these wonderful panelists, and actually just understand on a larger part what type of detrimental force the school to prison pipeline actually is on our communities. I don't know if everyone here has done any personal research in it or have any experiences within that community of those who have been through that experience. But I myself, several of my family members are right now in jail because of similar situations in their life. Basically, I just came to share some of that experience, and like I said, learn something new. Thank you for having me. Thanks for springing this on me. And, I hope we have a great panel for you guys. Yeah.
Although Alex isn't able to participate, I would still like to read through the introduction I prepared for him just to honor his presence. Alex Davis is a graduate of the Arches Mentorship Program and is currently a youth intern and trainee at the Center for NuLeadership on Urban Solutions, an independent research, training, and advocacy human justice think tank formerly housed at Medgar Evers College. Next we have Nancy Ginsburg. Nancy Ginsburg is the director of the Adolescent Intervention and Diversion Project and the Criminal Practice of the Legal Aid Society. Nancy has represented thousands of youth in criminal, juvenile delinquency, child protective, foster care, and educational administrative proceedings, and is responsible for the legislative and policy issues concerning court-involved youth in the adult criminal court system. Next we have Abdul Malik Talib. Abdul Malik Talib is a lifelong Bronx resident and a highly respected community activist and organizer in the Bronx and Harlem communities. Abdul is the recent founder of FUSED, which stands for Families United for Social and Educational Development, a nonprofit organization created to work with at-risk youth involved in gangs and antisocial behavior and their families. Next we have Angelo Pinto. Angelo Pinto is the campaign
Divine.
Oh, this is out of order? Let's switch that around. Next we have Dr. Divine Pryor. Dr. Divine Pryor serves as the Executive Director of the Center for NuLeadership on Urban Solutions, an independent research, training, and advocacy human justice think tank formerly housed at Medgar Evers College. Dr. Divine is a social scientist with an extensive knowledge and expertise in the criminal justice, health, and social service fields, and has developed trainings and workshops for professionals that address issues such as anti-gang initiatives, poverty, literacy, unemployment, housing, and healthcare. Next, we have Angelo Pinto. Angelo Pinto is the campaign manager for the Correctional Association's Juvenile Justice Project. Angelo oversees the Correctional Association's Raise the Age campaign, which seeks to increase New York State's age of criminal responsibility in the practice of housing children in adult jails and prisons, and ensure that children in the juvenile justice system receive appropriate rehabilitation services. This is our panel for today. I do hope you enjoy. Can you all hear me over here?
Yes.
Good? Okay. If I ever get too low, just yell it out and I will increase the volume. I don't want to stay at the panel. I'd rather sit here and, be with the flow. So I'm just gonna jump right in and just kind of give the panelists a chance to offer more information about themselves and kind of give them a chance to describe what brings them to the table. So we don't have to go in any particular order. We can just go on. But the question is, what brings you to the table? Why is dismantling the school to prison pipeline important to you?
So I've been doing this for a long time. I've been representing kids for over 22 years, both in family court and criminal, although most of my career now has been in criminal. We represent kids, mostly 13 to 18, who are prosecuted for all kinds of offenses in both criminal and Supreme Court in all 5 counties of New York. And we became very, very involved in educational advocacy because lots of our kids were being court referred from schools. And we saw that the only way to push back on that was to push back on the schools. And we started doing lots and lots and lots of suspension hearings and started winning a lot of them. And part of what I would like to address tonight is I would like all of you to go home and read the discipline code and start doing suspension hearings for the kids in the most affected communities. Very, very, very few cases of kids who are suspended ever go to hearing. The schools generally illegally encourage parents and kids to plead no contest. And many of those suspensions could probably be overturned. And we would have many more, I believe, that we would have many more kids remain in school and not have suspensions on their records if they had advocates fighting for them at these hearings. The other thing is that if there were people fighting for the kids who the schools are trying to suspend, they would probably stop trying to suspend so many kids. And systems often respond to reverse pressure. And this is an area really where that has never been explored by the advocacy community. There are very, very few available advocates to represent the tens of thousands of kids who are suspended. But if we can win suspension hearings for kids who have been arrested for the offenses, you can imagine what the success rate would be for kids who are suspended for really minor things. So we believe that schools are suspending kids completely unchecked and unmonitored, and probably a large, large percentage of those, if there was real pushback, would not exist. And if we could stop kids from being suspended at the first time, then it would change a lot of kids' paths in the system.
No, so I stay ready so I don't have to get ready. Good evening, I'm happy to be here. This issue is a very complex issue. Let me say that it's a multi-tiered issue, and it's so intricately intertwined with so many institutions that it's very difficult to try to condense it into a few short remarks. But I'm gonna tell you some stories throughout the evening, and I think that the stories will be illustrated. We've heard the statistics. I think that most of us are aware of what the problem and the issue is. And so I think that it probably would be more impactful if I can talk to you about the impact of zero tolerance policies of the school to prison pipeline. I want you to think back about 5 years ago, if you were watching the 7 o'clock or the 11 o'clock news, you saw the image of a 5-year-old African-American girl who was handcuffed in a public school in the state of Florida. She was handcuffed and she was carried to the squad car by the handcuffs. And she was placed in the car for over an hour so that she could be taught a lesson, which was what was reported by the police officer when they were later interviewed. That child, I'm certain, was probably scared to death, was probably traumatized, but even more so, I can't imagine what justification that anyone, the principal, the teacher, or the police could use to try to make reason and logic out of why a 5-year-old African-American girl who did not have a weapon, who was not involved in a fight, didn't have a knife, what was your rationale behind handcuffing them, and did you not think of what the psychological and emotional impact that would have on a 5-year-old? So that's one of the outcomes. I'll tell you a story, and then when I come back, I'll get into some of the other details. But this is what the end result of the school to prison pipeline is, because the pipeline is not about the school building, but it's about conditions and environments that cultivate and nurture certain kinds of behaviors and practices, and certain decisions are made and certain values are perpetuated. And I can say, you know, not only from my research, from personal experience, that unfortunately we live in a country where all life is not valued the same. Some life is more valued than other life. And I'll leave it there and I'll revisit it later. But this story is about a young African-American male. He was in the 3rd grade with his peers about 12 years ago when we visited the school, and these children were acting out, and so they asked us to come in and do some of this kind of dynamic work we do with young people. And we did that, and we began to talk to the young people. It wasn't long before we found out a lot of them had fathers who were incarcerated, and some of them had mothers. And just for you women, you should know that women are now the fastest growing segment of the prison population in America. You should know that. And so we began to talk to these young people, and we began to hear that they've heard gunshots. Some of them have actually seen people hurt. They've seen drugs. They know about it. Things that I just don't think 3rd graders should know, but they knew about these things. And so that's why we begin to promote education. And so that's why you got to go to school so you can learn, and you can become doctors and lawyers. You can help mommy and daddy. You can fulfill all your dreams. That you're brilliant, you're bright, you're extraordinary, and we're relying on you because you are our future. You are our hopes and our dreams. And we began to motivate and inspire them. And at that point, we broke them up into groups, and we told them to each go back and draw where they saw themselves in the future. And the 4 groups did so. One group came back and they drew a classroom with a tunnel that went from the classroom with little stick children walking through the tunnel straight into the prison. So we terminated the exercise because obviously I wasn't that good at giving them instructions. So I wanted to clarify what my instructions were, and I wanted to give to them the instructions again. And so when I began to, the little 3rd grade, little black kid, he yanked my jacket and he said, "Mister, we understood what you said." And I said, "Well, I don't understand, because all the things that we talked about and all the things that I said you could become, out of all the things you could have drawn, why would you draw that?" And the little kid looked at me with a confused look on his face. He looked at the child on his left and he looked at the child on his right, and he just shrugged his shoulders. He said, "Because that's where we go, mister. Everybody knows that." And that's why I'm here tonight. More later.
How do I follow that?
So I'm going to try to jump in. My name is Abdul, Malik, as you can see. I'm from an organization called FUSE, Families United for Social Education and Development. The name says it all. I'm gonna tell you another story. It's more recent than what we've heard here, but I'm gonna go 3 weeks back. In the last 3 weeks, there was 112 young men and women, Latino and African American, arrested in the Bronx, and multiple considered gang stings, gang arrests under the umbrella of crew cut, which has been publicized by NYPD for quite some time, discussing issues of social media and the how you say irresponsible use these young people have used social media to conduct their gang activities. I'm going to tell you that the average age of those incarcerated between the ages of 18 and 25, most of these young men and women have some type of negative school experiences. So it's what we saw in the last 3 weeks with all these arrests, and we discussed to talk to these young people, and I've spoken to some of them because some of one of my programs, we found out that they all had some type of issues in school, right? So they had negative school experiences, prior police contact, and all of them had some type of prior court involvement. So you make the connection? Oh, so do I need to continue, right? Okay, but I am. So that's just from the 18 to 25-year-olds, and it was 112 young men and women incarcerated in the last 3 weeks. So how do let me just tell you how I got involved. I was a student in the public school system. I had issues in school. I got suspended 6 times in my 12 years being in the public school. I was actually 13 years when I got left back, but 6 years of the 13 years I was suspended from school. Long-term suspensions for minor infractions I would consider fighting, things that boys do. Not until my mom decided that was enough, and I thank her every day now that she had some insight and said, well, guess what, I'm gonna just take you out to school. I'm gonna help you continue to cultivate your talent, which at the time I was into sports, and then she decided to put me into a parochial school where I was able to successfully graduate and go on to college. So I want to say, let me give my mom a round of applause. Without her continuous efforts to find avenues for me to be successful, I would not be sitting here talking to you today. So how does that work for now? I have also had two strapping young soldiers, my sons, who were in the public school system, who went through some of the same things I went through. So I had to really entrench myself in understanding how the system works to defend them from issues that they were going to face and did face in the public school systems. To the point that I was advocating for my oldest son continuously, he was diagnosed with ADHD, being threatened by the Board of Education, that we will hold you accountable because you're not medicating your son. We will hold you accountable because your son continues to act up. And originally my whole idea was once he was in the school building in your presence, then you guys are in charge in charge with educating my son, right? That seemed to be a pushback. The sister here spoke about understanding the Chancellor's Code, the Chancellor's Regulation, as well as the Student Handbook. 2 different books. There's 2 different books, 2 different sets of rules. Because I've had conversation with professionals in the schools where one says, well, according to the Student Handbook, you have multiple anecdotals that can be in place before we even get to suspension. How come we haven't gone through the anecdotals? And then the pushback was, according to the Chancellor's Code, this is what we're supposed to do. So here it is, we're fighting as parents a losing battle because we don't even know what book we can go to defend our children. And our children definitely don't know what's going on because they're being pushed out of school, not necessarily because they can't do the work, because there's a culture that if once a child becomes deemed difficult, and that's by human nature, when you no longer want to work with a young person or whatever the case may be, you have a tendency of pushing them out. So then people use their power negatively to remove a problem. And I also like to talk about the grapevine, because the grapevine is just as strong in the community as it is in the teachers' lounges when the teachers go and talk about students. So there's a real serious importance for parents to understand where your role is going into the school, dealing with the teachers, the administration, and know you have rights just to be in the building. Because for me as a parent, I run into this quite often when I'm going to come and see what my daughter's doing in school, because I have an older daughter in school now. Oh no, you can't. You have to make an appointment. is this a public school? Then I don't need to make an appointment. Because I'm on every paperwork that's in the school, so I have the right to be here. The blue card wasn't sent home to mom alone, it was sent home to mom and dad. So there's no reason why I can't walk in this building anytime I want to, look in the classroom without, just letting you know I'm here because I know it's security, but walk in, look in and see what my child is doing. And have a meeting with a principal or anyone when my child comes to me with an issue or there's an issue that arises that needs to be addressed. My daughter's actually doing very well. She'll graduate next year. I have one more left, a 5-year-old. So I definitely want to make sure I'm involved in this even more so that when she enters the school, into public school next year, into the kindergarten, that she will be successful as my other daughter and my sons are now.
So, I think the folks on the panel really gave some great insight onto around the school to prison pipeline and why they're here, and I think I'm going to take it in a different direction. I'm here for many reasons, but two of the, in a general sense, is personal reasons and professional reasons. Professionally, because of the work I do professionally, and I'll talk about that shortly, but also personally. About maybe 6 years ago, I was at a conversation, I think it was at Tamdji, and it was about the school to prison pipeline, 6 years ago. And it was I had heard about the school to prison pipeline before that. It was one of the first times that I really was engaged in a conversation around depth of the issue, the intricacies of the issues, and whatnot. And coming here today, getting to the panel, one of the things that strikes me, and it's begun to strike me about a lot of issues, not just the school to prison pipeline issues, but a tremendous amount of issues when you talk about the criminal justice system, mass incarceration, is that we continue to have these conversations. Year after year, probably decade after decade, we continue to have these conversations, and oftentimes we're having these conversations as a result of the problem getting worse. So we're continuing to have conversations year after year, and the problem is getting worse. It's getting more out of control. And I say that to say, I think the goal of everyone in this room, and certainly my goal being here today, is really to have this conversation so that at some point we can end these conversations, right? So that we can go on to a different kind of conversation about really how do we allow certain communities and certain individuals to have meaningful life experiences? Because right now, so many individuals, and particularly certain communities, are denied that. The other thing I want to say that's important to me, and it's about these conversations, and I think it's important when you're having these conversations to think about it. This is maybe more than 6 years ago. When I was in undergrad, I'm a native New Yorker, but I went to undergrad in Norfolk State. And one of the reasons I went to undergrad is because my mother was trying to get me out of New York because of some of the things that I was involved in. And I was on a panel, I remember there was a symposium on ending the prison industrial complex. It was the first time I heard that term. I was like, the prison industrial complex, what is this? Who knew? And the reason why they were doing it, because there was a company at the time called Sodexo Marriott, who happened to be making a fortune off the prison industrial complex, right, privatization of prisons, and they happened to also be serving the food at Norfolk State University at the time. So folks were involved in a campaign to get them removed from serving the food at this school. So at this time I was learning about the prison industrial complex. And I was in a panel, I was in a discussion, and they were talking about prison industrial complex, how it happens, how it works, and we were having a know your rights training simultaneously, right? And I remember it was the first time I've ever been in, any kind of conversation like that. And I said to the gentleman who was moderating, I was like, shouldn't we be here figuring out how to stop having these conversations? Like, shouldn't we be having the conversation of what is the work that needs to be done so we don't need to have know your rights trainings in certain communities for certain groups of individuals, so that people just have the rights they're supposed to have, right? And what I'm trying to say is the same thing applies here today when we talk about the school to prison pipeline. Like, we have to, I think, really understand the magnitude of injustice for us to even be here having this conversation, right? There's certain groups of individuals who will never have this conversation. They never have to think about what happens when they go to school, when they leave school, what their families have been through. There's tremendous amounts of individuals around this country, in this state, in this city, who will never have those conversations, right? So it's not enough just to have the conversation and say, you know, we're doing good work. It's important to understand the travesty of having to have the conversation, right? And the travesty of many children's lives who are in school today, going to be in school tomorrow, and weeks to come, because the reality is we haven't developed a strategy to address this at all, contrary to what anyone may say. And I think that's tremendously important. The other thing I will say about what I do professionally, I work on a campaign called Raise the Age. New York State is one of 2 states, North Carolina is the other, that automatically prosecutes 16 and 17-year-olds as adults for any crime that they commit. So if you're in New York State, you're 16, you're 17 years old, you commit a crime, you automatically prosecute as adults. 13, 14, and 15-year-olds can also be prosecuted as adults for certain crimes, and a child as young as 7 in New York State could be arrested, right? And of course, this has tremendous connections to the school to prison pipeline, because a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds happen to be in school, right? So oftentimes arrest can take place in school, and you can find yourself incarcerated. And what that means is, right, for 16 and 17-year-olds, is you can be incarcerated in adult jail or prison. So in Rikers Island, the 16 and 17-year-olds, I had the opportunity to teach legal research some years ago in Rikers Island, and there's a particular unit for 16 and 17-year-olds. 2 weeks ago, I was at Island Academy, what they call it, the high school on Rikers Island, talking to some young men about what they want to do after, and some of the young men were telling me, and I know because I worked in Rikers Island, you know, I might be going away for 6 years. Another young man, I might be going away for 20 years, 18 years old. And it always going, I mean, I'm not a fan of going to Rikers Island or any correctional facility, but it often reminds me of the magnitude of the problem, the severity of the issue, the necessity to figure out new ways to address old problems, right? And I mean in a drastically radical way. It's important, of course, we have youth who get suspended every day. It's important to address those suspensions so that youth lives aren't disrupted and destroyed. But we also have to figure out how do we address the institution, the mechanism that's going to keep this machine going, right? We have to have a systematic approach and an individual approach, right? Because individuals are caught up in the system daily, but this system is something that's been around for quite some time. And we have to figure out what we do about that. So, I don't want to ramble on because I've been going for a long time. But I look forward to this conversation.
Yes. To me, yes. Feeling good. There's multiple ways that I can actually answer that question. If you ask me why I'm here, I would say I'm lucky. If you ask my mother why I'm here, she said because she doesn't play that.
Let's give this mother a round of applause.
But yeah, to continue along that same line of thought, I'm here because I learned from the mistakes of others. As I mentioned before, I have an older brother and an older cousin, both young black men who have went through it before me. I seen some of the mistakes that they were making. I started following in that footsteps to an extent, and then I started realizing where the break needed to take place. I have witnessed multiple of my friends become incarcerated, get caught up in the gang life, drug life, stuff like that. And a lot of it started within school. A lot of it started with being suspended. It may seem like something small and whatever at first, like, oh, 3 days out of school, whatever. But those things add up. Those 3 days you're not in school, you're outside running the streets doing whatever, getting caught up. Being native of Brooklyn, East New York, that's my, you know, that's my community. A lot of people that I grew up with cannot sit in this room right now. A lot of people that I grew up with, some of which are dead, some of which are in jail, and I've seen, that's why I said initially I was lucky. I could have got caught up in that as well. I don't mean to make this conversation too heavy, but it is a heavy conversation. You have to understand that. So just being a person of East New York and still living in East New York, still being of that community, and started educating myself, I saw where that break was. Like I said, people getting caught up in school, and I saw where my path was. I was also in school, but I was trying to be focused. So me educating myself and taking that information back to my community, that's why I'm here today. So I can learn from the people up here, so I can learn from you all, so I can understand what the issue is and how we're going to tackle it. Because as you said, we should not be having a conversation about it. We should be having a conversation what we're going to do about it. That's just the way I feel about the issue. As you can see, I'm trying to get pumped up about it. But just not to continue and ramble on, because some people spoke a long time. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to have this conversation. I'm here to know what the steps we need to take as a community. And I'm here representing myself, other young black men like myself, other people of color like myself, and just find a solution.
Can I say one more thing, John? One thing that I think is important to think about in the context of this conversation is what we deem as bad behavior, right? And even criminal behavior, because for certain groups of individuals, almost anything you do is criminalized, right? Where other groups of individuals, they could go outside and do things that they could play hooky, they could fight, they could do all of that, and they're not criminalized. So I think it's important to keep that in perspective when we think about bad behavior, right? And we say, you know, kids shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't be doing that. And there's I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, it's probably a little bit before your time, but there's a song by a gentleman named Tupac Shakur, and it was called Trapped, right? And this is before he really became as popular as he is now. But he's talking about his experience growing up and being trapped in this system. And he's talking, is there's police chasing him in the video, but he's talking about this feeling of being trapped, and no matter what you do, you're trapped in this box, and the system's going to find its ways to put your claws on you. The other thing I want to say is there's a book by a gentleman named George Jackson called Soledad Brother. Actually, there's a book called Blood in My Eye. And in the beginning of the book, someone asks him, how long have you been rebelling, or how long have you been in rebellion? He says that, you know, he said that's an interesting question, he never thought about it. And then he said that when he was 13 was the first time he had an encounter with the police. And he said he realized that's how long he's been in rebellion, since he's been having encounters with police. So oftentimes when you see young individuals in the communities having encounters with the police, it's a reaction to an internal feeling that something's wrong. Right? It's a response that something's up, something's going on, and oftentimes that may be the only way to express it.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry. Oh, no, but just to add to what he just said just now. Oh, I can't? Oh, okay, good. You got the juice. You got the juice.
Come back, there's more time.
Good.
Okay, so there, in many stories, in many cases, a student made a mistake or happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or just had to deal with somebody yelling at them for being in the wrong hallway when they were lost. So I want to ask, how can a student show dissent or advocate for themselves without being prosecuted, if that is possible?
So I'm gonna use a term that I'm sure everybody is familiar with: condition. And there are conditions set in schools where, you know, there is a very distinct position authority takes in the school, and the young people are supposed to understand we do not challenge authority, right? So not all schools are like that. I've been to some schools as of recently who have very lax. They're actually building relationships, and even though they're still in an authoritative position, they don't use that authoritative power to control what goes on, but allows the identities of these young people to formulate and their ideas to be shared. So in dealing with, you know, conflicts, it seems that they're working it out. So I want to say I've seen that recently in some schools. But traditional, let's go to traditionally schools in my community, there's a hierarchy. You don't violate. Students at the bottom, staff and teachers and administration at the top. Parents kind of fall somewhere in the middle, right? And the parents have this, I wrote down a couple of things while the panel was speaking, to talk about conditions, the parent-teacher relationships. the condition of the student at risk teacher relationships, right? So here it is, a young person who is deemed at risk, who's not really trying to be a criminal, but just wants to be heard because they feel like they're being violated and they're speaking back to the authority. Now, how do you have this that doesn't create you getting kicked out of school? One, they need to be educated on their rights in school. So you have to understand what your rights are as a student. So there's a Bill of Rights for students, and students need to know their rights, right? So the second piece I like to put into that is parents' participations. Parents need to be involved in parent groups in the school, whether it's the PTA, creating independent parent groups to discuss the issues that go on with their children in school. Because you find most parents are going through the same thing. If their children are being deemed as at risk or problem children, if you talk to one parent and hear a story, nine other parents are going to tell you the same story. So they need to be, brought to the table or brought into a situation where they can kind of speak to their situation, find out their support, get educated, help educate their children, and say that you're not wrong because, Angelo said, I'm everybody here, I'm so excited to be with these brothers, and I haven't seen them in a little while. So, like Angelo said, is this whole thing about them making that connection and knowing each other, right, and knowing that there's room for these. We can educate you, empower you. You get support from your parents being educated and empowered, and then you're going back to the school to work with those in power in the school who have that same anxiety, because there are teachers that have anxieties about how do we work together, right? But often they're shut down because of the condition of seniority, or what it is, and you'll lose your what do they call it, your tenure. If you go against the grain of what's being done in this school, right? So how do they educate? They need to be educated. They need to make sure the parents are educated. They need to find those educators in their school who can work with them, and then create a forum, some type of forum where they can go and really lay out these issues that can get to the people in power and kind of work from within before we get to the next level. That's just what I'm saying.
All the students in the house taking notes?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some research to do. I want everyone to remember the Rosenthal experiments. Because my brother here was talking about conditions, and I know that experiment, talks about how perception, impacts, outcomes and how things become a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the Rosenthal experiment, started out with rats. There was a professor who, took a group of rats and broke them in half and took his class, and this side of the class, he said, listen, I have these rats. And I want you to teach these rats to run through the maze. Now I want to tell you, these are Norwegian rats. These are the fastest, quickest, smartest rats on the planet. I'm telling you, they're going to run through that maze so fast you won't even be able to record it. But for scientific purposes, I need you to document it, and I want you to bring me back the results. So you go. You took the other half of the class and said, now, I really have to ask something of you, and I really feel bad to even have to ask you this. I have these Harlem rats. And I need you to teach these rats to run through the maze. Now let me tell you, these are the dumbest, stupidest rats in the world. I tell you, I feel bad to even ask you to do this, but for scientific purposes, see if you can, get these rats to run through the maze. And told them to go. So they both went with their information, and they got the results, and they came back, and he says, well, you hold on, what happened? He says, yes, you were right, these Norwegian rats, they were so quick, they ran through it. We had to slow the tape down, just so we could, record how fast they went through. They were just like you told us. They were smart, they were quick, they were intelligent. He says, yeah, we knew that already, but we needed it to be documented for scientific purposes. And he says, thank you so much. And then the other group, he says, now, what are your results? And they said, well, just like you said, these rats, they were the stupidest rats. What rat doesn't eat cheese? They wouldn't eat chocolate. We couldn't even get them to go in the maze, more or less run through it. And just like you told us, they were stupid, dumb rats, and we're so sorry. He says, yes, we understand, and thanks for your results, but for scientific purposes, and he said you can both go. And before they got to say, hold up, wait a second, there's one thing I need to tell both groups. There's no such thing as a Norwegian rat. Nor is there any such thing as a Harlem rat. In fact, both of those rats came from the same family. Now I need Group A to tell me why is it because you thought your rats were smart and intelligent and fast, you were able to teach them so easily, and why is it Group B, the rats that you thought were dumb and stupid and slow, you weren't able to teach them at all? Could your perception of those rats prior to you beginning to teach them have an outcome? Now, why I tell you all this, yeah, go ahead, y'all can share. Now, I abbreviated the story. You want the whole full-blown version, you look up Rosenthal experiment, and then they did it with children. And then they did it with adults. So this experiment was done several times, and guess what? Each time, the results were the same. Because when you come in with a certain perception, it has a major impact on your interaction. It has a major impact on your perception, on their perception, on the energy, the dynamic that happens between you, the energy, all of that. And so, in my last 30 seconds, let me say that, you know, we do a lot of this work. And I start off by telling you this is a very complex problem, right? You heard the stats. And, you know, I have, you know, family, you know, in the entertainment industry, so they have a few more dollars than I do, so they are kind of like, you know, middle upper class. They're a little snooty too, you know, and so I get exposure to some things. And I have some of my colleagues when I go, you know, to Louisiana, back to where my family's from, or to Los Angeles, I have friends of mine who, they're not black, they're white, they don't have the same experience as I do. And I remember a friend of mine, Peter McGinnigan, you know, said to me that, you know, every now and then when they were growing up, they would go and they would like borrow a boat, you know. Now, if Mr. Thompson was home, they'd let him know in advance, but if he wasn't home, they just took the boat, we'd let him know when we come back, you know, after all, we just borrowed the boat. So they would go out and borrow the boat, and they would drink a little bit and smoke a little weed, you know, and have, every now and then they have a little fight or something. But the one thing that blew my mind, he said, you know, every now and then we'd be coming back to the dock, and there would be the police there to harass us. And that's what he mean, harass you. He said, yeah, they're waiting there, you know, to harass us, you know, telling us about why did we take the boat without permission. We were going to tell them we took the boat. And I said, Pete, I said, Billy, you do know that that's grand larceny. Oh, you can't take someone's boat without permission. But the moral of the story is it's a different lifestyle. I mean, he didn't even understand the context of what was happening. That, you know, and the police harassing you, you lucky. I wish they would just harass me. You know, they want to arrest me, they want to kill me, they want to, you know, so it's a different lifestyle. And so what I want everyone here to understand, and I say this, you know, when you're born with privilege and entitlement, I don't say this to put you on a guilt trip. I say this to say that if you're born with privilege and entitlement, you have a larger responsibility. You know, you have an obligation to do more because you have more. And that's just the way it is. I didn't set it up that way. That's just the way it is. And so we need to understand that this issue has a lot to do with race. It has a lot to do with class. It has a lot to do with gender. It has a lot to do with values and perception. It has the way that America developed, the way we evolved. We got some serious problems, so all of us have to go back to our respective laboratories and we got to figure out what role do I play? How do I dismantle this? Because if I can do more, why don't I do more? If I can do better, why don't I? You know, if I have access to resources that others don't, why wouldn't I present that to them and find a way to do it that's not demeaning and degrading? So all of us are complicit in this, you know, because to not do anything is to do something. So, you know, there's no way that anyone can get out of it. You know, we're all a part of this, we're in this together, and if we don't learn to work this out together, we're going to all self-destruct together. That's what it comes down to. So that's just my little piece. Thank you.
Anybody else on the panel like to answer?
I would say, you said to encourage dissent without being penalized.
Yeah, how can students
I would-
speak up for themselves?
I would say to encourage a young person to ask educated wise. When I say educated wise, I mean don't just accept it for truth. Understand why that is the case. Understand. Be vocal about it. A lot of the time, like say for example, just to give an example, I know we're talking about experience and everything, experiments and such things. But I have twin nephews. One of which lives with me, another lives with an extended part of the family. So I'm with both of them. We're at the park. The cops walk past the park, one of my nephews goes to hide. So the nephew that lives with me asked him why. Why are you hiding? He said, I don't know, that's just what, you know, like, everybody hides, like, you're supposed to hide from the police. He's 7. He has done nothing to get him into that state of mind that he has to hide from the police. My nephew, he's very well spoken, he knows how to vocalize his opinion. It gets a little much sometimes. He likes to talk, just talk. But yeah, like, just watching that interaction in itself, it made me feel mixed emotions, pride and shame. Shame that as a people and as a, like my nephew that hit, he had to identify himself by his color and he had to hide, like, oh, this is what my people would have to do from a police officer. But it made me feel pride that my other nephew was able to explain that to him, like, why? Like, why are you doing this? It's not right, give me any back, like, he talks like this. Why are you doing that? Give me background. Why? 7 years old, he's talking like, give me background, give me some of your experience, why did you do that? And I feel like encouraging young people, or just people in general, to act educated wise, have some information to back up your question, or, you know, give them, you know, an explanation. I think that would, like, number one, kind of get on the nerves of the administration, but also it would let the administration know that our young people are not just there to be sheep. You're not just going to lead them blind. You're going to have a reason why you're doing this, how you're doing it, and have some foundation behind it. Not just say because I said so. I feel like a lot of people in school right now is in that because I said so school system. Instead of that, this is why. That's all I can say that.
So this is my feeling. Dissent is hard because I think dissent is a hard word because people think different things when they hear the word dissent, and it's hard to sometimes to disagree with an adult when you're a child and do it respectfully. And sometimes when the adult is disrespectful to a child, it's easy to become equivalently disrespectful, but the adult is never, ever, ever punished in the school system. It's always the child. And so, Joanna's here. NYCLU is all about dissent, and the Bill of Rights allows for dissent, and it allows for having a different opinion and having a different position. But what we always advise young people who want to be dissentful is that you must be respectful when you express your dissent. And if there is a situation where an adult is disrespectful, then you must create a record. And what we always say is, everyone has a supervisor, and every supervisor has a supervisor, and every supervisor's supervisor has a supervisor. And you better learn how to start writing letters to everyone in the city and keep a really clear record of this is what was said and how that made the child feel, and this is what was done. And there are elected officials on many, many levels who are very interested in these stories. You have city council people, you have state assembly people, you have the mayor's office. There's really no end to the number of letters that you guys can write. And there are advocacy organizations if you think that a particular school is run by an administration that is violating the rights that are given to the kids in that school, then you need to make that known. And there are all kinds of ways to make that known. But it's very hard for an individual parent, I think, to advocate for their child because many parents had bad experiences in school themselves. It's embarrassing for many parents to have to go in and to deal with that. But when a parent has support of other parents or advocacy groups or any kind of name your support system, it becomes much easier. And if you can take that individual responsibility off the parent of the individual child and the community supports that parent, then it's a very different conversation. And how you define community is you know, depends on the situation. Is it an advocacy group and politicians? Is it, I mean, we all represent organizations, and we are just a sampling of a larger group of organizations that are out there in the city, and every politician has a whole staff working for them, and they pay people just to read letters. But people don't write the letters. Like, people don't talk about these things, and you know, I know everyone's talking about, it's true, there are all these big systemic problems, and I know I always leave these things like, oh my God, the world is so fucked up, how are we ever gonna solve anything? But like, everything starts with an individual action, and you have to take the individual action, you have to do it. And we have to stand up for each kid who is being told he's not good enough to be in a school, and he's not important enough to be part of that community. And enough people stand up for each individual kid, then the collective voice begins to be heard. And it would be nice if we could all in this room solve the problem of historical racism in this city and in this country, but I don't have a lot of faith in that. But I think that we can stand up for I think we can stand up for individual kids and maybe chip away at that problem one day at a time.
I think that there has to be institutional change. Like, you can't create an atmosphere where one can dissent without being punished if there's not institutional change. There has to be an environment where you can dissent without being punished, right? Or without being fearful. What needs to be in place for that to happen, it's so fascinating. I mean, parents and communities need to realize you own that school. Your tax dollars go to pay for everything in that. That's your school, right? It's like the American Revolution: no taxation, no representation, right? How could we be taxed and we're not? Our interests aren't represented in our own community? How does that happen, right? It's counterintuitive to think I'm ashamed that this is happening to this is something I own. I own this school. My tax dollars pay for this, and I don't feel comfortable to walk in there. All of these, it blows my mind when I think about it now, right? It blows my mind. But I think it also is interesting that I understand the necessity for respect, right? But I think oftentimes you give respect because you get respect, right? And there's certain individuals in certain communities who've made money and consistently disrespect other individuals. And then we tell those other individuals, well, do this respectfully, right? This is what Dr. King said in the 60s. He was like, so you're going to tell certain individuals not to oppose police officers, but we're going to go to other countries and start a war. So we're going to tell little kids not to dissent or be disrespectful, and their parents, while they're actually under siege. Right? Think about the head trip you're playing on people, right? And individuals that are already marginalized. Think about the head trip, right? And this is something they own because their dollars are going to it. Like, you have to tell the person you're paying, you have to play nice with the person you're paying, right? In the institution that you're paying. So, we're talking about the school-to-prison pipeline. The reason why I say that, why it's important, is because the educational system needs restructuring, right? And then we talk about the prison-industrial complex, that needs restructuring or needs to be just thrown out the window altogether, right? And oftentimes the educational system needs the same thing. I've talked to folks from, Teachers United and NICOR and progressive teachers groups, and they've been marginalized. Teachers have been marginalized by what's happening, right? Everyone's been marginalized except for the folks in authority, the police, these folks that are deciding what's going to happen with the outcomes of individual lives. Everyone's been marginalized. Parents have been marginalized, teachers have been marginalized. There really has to be radical change at this point. And I think, and that's what I was saying earlier, it has to be a both and, right? It can't be an either or. Of course it's not, just go for systematic change. You have to address individuals who have immediate needs who find themselves in the system, but you have to develop a plan and a strategic plan to work together to assess what's going on and strategically attack it. Otherwise, we're going to continue to fight for individuals. And that just doesn't get the job. We've been doing it. And to the point, there's a bunch of organizations in New York City doing it.
You know, it's almost as if I paid Angelo to set me right up. I mean, this is unbelievable because, you know, I wanted to, you know, share with you that, you know, I was formerly educated in the prison system. I went in as a young man at the age of 17 and I spent 10 years in prison. I came home in 1990 with a master's degree and I continued my education and, you know, went on to get my doctorate degree. That's not what I wanted to say. So my colleague and I decided, because we were working for these different organizations, and you know, we kind of came to the conclusion that a lot of folks we were working for, like, didn't know as much about the issues we did. You know, so like, why are we working for them, right? Why don't we like have our own organization, right? And so we got together about 10 years ago and decided we're gonna create our own organization. You know, and you know, our organization, you know, kind of slumping along for about 7 years, and we realize now why that was, because, you know, we were formerly incarcerated professionals who were building an institution, but there was always this cloud of suspicion over us, you know, and there was always this apprehension. Is this a new con? You know, is this something they're up to? So it took us some time to build legitimacy, you know, and we had to, you know, make sure that everything was tight, every I had to be done, every T was crossed. So we built the organization, and, you know, I remember last year when our budget, you know, got to $1 million. You know, that might not be a big deal to y'all, but you know, when you start your own organization and you got $1 million budget, you know, you think you large, although that ain't really a lot of money. You can barely pay 5 staff with that and your overhead and so forth. But it was an accomplishment. But the biggest accomplishment was when we realized, looking back, that we had built a body of work, and that we brought in professionals to help us like design our theory of change and our methodology about how we actually move that theory along. And we came up with the CSI model. And the CSI model doesn't stand for crime scene investigation. I know that's a popular term, but it actually stands for community empowerment, system realignment, and individual transformation. And basically what that is a methodology that allows us to operate on 3 levels simultaneously. So if we have a problem with an individual, while we're interviewing that individual, we come to find out that there are some systemic problems. There are some policies, there's some procedures, there, you know, are some practices that put barriers in the way and restrictions so that individual can't move forward. So we have to begin to start to organize and mobilize the community so we can change policy and the structure. While we help this individual go through their own transformation, the community has to be empowered and the structure has to be realigned. So that CSI method now, we said, wow, this is serious. They said, well, you've already been doing this. You guys just never really sat down and figured out the methodology, but that's why I'm here. And since then, and that's been a little while ago, we've been applying that methodology to everything we do. My God. Let me tell you something. When you're working on the individual level and you're making progress, you think you're doing something, but you're missing the community level and the institutional level. When you're working on the institutional level, you get far removed from the individual, so your information ain't as current. You know, you kind of get caught up in the bureaucracy. You're working on the community level, you're getting responses from the community, but you don't know what's happening in the institution, and individuals are kind of floundering. But when you come up with a method that allows you to lock all 3 of those together, and as you move simultaneously with this methodology, you begin to see change take place on 3 levels. And you begin to measure that change. And you begin to decide that we can have short-term goals and long-term goals, and that we can, you know, document our progress over time, and that we can actually create measurable outcomes that are practical, that are realistic, and that have a direct impact on every single level. And I'll tell you something. I'm so proud of this methodology. We just wrote it up. In fact, if you go on our website, and it's in the thing there, centerfornuleadership.org, you'll see the methodology, you'll see our theory for change. Our theory for change is human justice. Human justice is a formula. Human rights plus human development equals human justice. Because as far as we're concerned, you can never get to justice if criminal is your starting point. So we have to start at the point of human and understand that all of us have certain basic inalienable rights that we don't have to negotiate. Just on the basis of our humanity, they belong to us. We don't have to inherit them, we don't have to earn them, we don't have to bargain for them, we don't have to negotiate, they're automatically ours. And if those rights are respected and those rights are protected, then our ability to achieve our fullest potential allows us to develop, and through that human development, we can now move towards human justice. Woo.
I'm gonna now open it up to the House for questions, comments.
Speak now, if I ever hold your peace.
There's a question over there.
Not really a question, but I prefer to state my case.
Okay, sure.
So at this end?
Yes, stand up.
Well, I feel, can I just ask a question? Where does a pipe usually lead? Where does a pipe usually lead to? When you like flush the toilet, when you have a sink and you use the water, can I ask the question, where does the pipe lead to? Yes, the sewer. Take the pipeline from school to prison. They're taking us to a sewer, taking us to a prison. No. Let's not take it. We're going to the sewers, and what usually goes down besides water into the sewers? Waste. And I think that's what they think some of us will amount to. That's waste. Well, imagine the sink, just a normal sink. Turn on the faucet, the water flows down. That's going to the sewer. But just see that, you know those one little sprinkles of water that just fall onto like the table of the sink? That's us. That's us right there. And you see that water is crystal clear. That's what our minds have to be. And that's what we have to think about to make sure that this is resolved.
I wanted to just really, before the question starts, there's some things that everybody's talked about. We just got to make it real. I like to really just be the most common person in any panel is that police impact, high impact zones equal high impact schools, and that's where we start to see a lot of the arrests. See, my understanding is that when this work we've done in our community, we see it I'm in the South Bronx, the 40th precinct, for those who know, one of the highest precincts in stop and frisk, and as well, you know, I'm not going to name names, but there was also, you know, during the stop and frisk litigation, an inspector was named in the litigation from being, you know, recorded for saying, identifying African American and Latino males between a certain age group to be criminals all the time, right? And these are the people that you will continuously stop and frisk because these are the people perpetrating crimes, right? These are predators. But then we go to the schools in those same districts, right? And there's high levels of school safety interaction in those schools. You know, you need to understand there are more, you know, school safety officers than are guidance counselors in the schools, right? So we talk about conditions. The conditions just don't start with the teachers, but it's a part of it, right? The teachers didn't the safety. There's instructions in the chancellor's regulations which tells a teacher, if you do not put a certain infraction in the system and it doesn't go downtown, you can possibly be fired. This is in the chancellor's regulations. So teachers are tied just as much as anybody else to put this stuff and put these incidences in the system, as opposed to using their common sense, their common decency to handle certain situations in the school. So it's been removed from the hands of the administration in the schools to deal with certain issues, and it's been put in the hands of NYPD, and NYPD is all about policing and incarceration. So let's be real clear. So, you know, one thing I wanted to also say about this before we move on to more questions is when we do suspensions, and I think that one of the things we did, I'm hoping this will lead to somebody ask more questions about that, is preserving the evidence in a suspension. Parents knowing how to preserve the evidence that's going to be produced at the suspension hearing from the moment they get the phone call your child is being suspended. That's very important. And also understanding to take that same evidence, because it is legal documents that can be turned over when your child goes to criminal court from the suspension. I'm working on a case like right now like that. So here it is. I have a young man, real quick, get back to questions. 16 years old. His jacket, he's been known in the school for stealing cell phones. That's what he's done. There's no questions about it. Other times he's been held accountable. But there was a final incident of a phone being stolen. It was a staff member's phone being stolen. This young man was, it took 3 days for the school to figure out, and they blamed him from day one. He was the one, he took it, this is what he does. And 3 days into going into this investigation, there was a warrant executed on this young man, at this young man's home at 5:30 in the morning. He was arrested. Taken to the precinct and then taken to court when he was eventually released to the custody of his grandmother. But now he's already been traumatized. He was then placed on, they were looking for a year suspension behind this. We go through the hearing process, they find that there's not enough evidence to even suspend him. But he's still in criminal court. Right. He was in court yesterday, right? And I'm saying to the family, this is what we talk about, education. While it's very important that everybody here who's a parent or advocate can go back and tell your parents, okay, it's time for us to start to get some learning done. Because grandma, the first time we went to court, I got there, and grandma, I'm so happy, she was like, Abdul is going to help me, and whatever he suggests we're going to do, we're going to offer him an ACD, contemplation of dismissal, and it'll go away. No, that is saying I'm guilty, but I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty, but, it's a gray area there. No way. We want 100% that this case is dismissed. Now accountability starts. Because after that, then we can hold somebody accountable legally, because there was evidence presented that said that this young man stole his phone, stole your phone. So that evidence had to be turned over to the police, and they had to feel that it was credible to go to a judge to get a search warrant and an arrest warrant, and then go to this young man's house and execute the warrant. According to your evidence, according to your statements from the people who you say gave you enough credible evidence to believe he stole it, we never saw this. So if you can use this to use it for suspensions, and that's why they want you to always, that whole piece about, oh, you don't have to come, just, say you're not, no contest. It's pleading guilty without pleading guilty, right? So then their whatever they've done is valid and justified. But when you say no, oh no, prove it, and they can't, then accountability has to play out. Because after you finish, you put this family through trauma. Somebody gotta be held for that. If you was hit by a car, you go get your treatment, get your leg fixed, whatever the case may be, and then when you go to court, you're gonna get a settlement. Well, you get $10,000 or $5,000. You're gonna get something for what? For your trauma, for what you're going through, right? What's the difference with this family now? And holding somebody accountable. Because see, I'm pushing the piece, and maybe after this conversation we can talk to the lawyers here. I want to hold DOE accountable because you started this. See, we're going to hold the police accountable. They got money for that. But DOEs need to be held accountable. And this is what we talk about, accountability. When principals, when deans who like to write up these suspensions and principals like to sign off these suspensions start seeing that there's a backlash because the information you're given is not correct, or you're illegally suspending these young people and we're holding you accountable, and you're not the principal in the school that you've been a principal for 10 years, maybe some people start looking, oh, let's take a better look at this. So I'm saying to all the parents in the room, or those speaking to parents, education, preservation, know your rights, know how to defend them, even if it means you got to take some days off of work. Because I don't believe in, my kid, I'm embarrassed because my kid did something. He's my kid, I got to handle it.
Just something really quick.
Yeah, take
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, my name is Laura Avila. I'm a student at the Columbia School of Social Work. And I'm interested in hearing the panel's opinion about where special education fits in the school prison pipeline.
Good question, we're gonna have to keep it short.
Okay, so I'm going to say one thing. Usually after arrest, we see IEPs. after kids are arrested, come back to prison, come back, go to whatever infraction or time they spend, they see an IEP. So the IEP is like developed once the kid go back to school. For those who, where it is before that, if a young person has an IEP, often the IEP is not being, they're not sticking to the IEP.
Individual education.
No, individual educational plan. So they're not being held to standard accountability with that IEP, right? So when a parent gets it, they don't know how to read it, so they need to be trained to learn how to read it, and then they need to hold the school accountable. And there is certain provisions for young people not to be suspended because they have an IEP. So you need to know.
But I don't know if that gets to harder. I think she has more.
Yeah, no, I have, so I taught middle school special education for 3 years. And I specifically worked with students who were labeled as emotionally disturbed. And what I found as a trend is that there is more and more push to test students to be tested for emotional disturbance. And a lot of times these were young men of color when their academic achievement was on par, and then after a year or two in the program, you saw a decline. So I'm just like curious to see where your thoughts are for reform in not using a special education, which is supposed to be a tool, like a leverage or a system for helping kids to access the curriculum, and not using that as a space to send kids essentially into or funnel them into prison.
Now that ain't fair. You know that ain't right. That's a loaded question. But what I will say is this, and I mean this in jest. If we took the DSM-5, right, the Diagnostic and Statistical Math, I think 5 is out now, right? Is it out? Well, 4 or 5 is out. If I took that manual, right, and I applied any one of the categories, everybody in this room got a mental disorder. At least one. And some of us have more. Listen, they said that I had an attention deficit disorder, that I had multiple personality disorders. They said that, oh, I had a bunch of stuff. I was bad, I was disruptive, I was incorrigible, forget it. You know what I'm saying? I had all of those things. Now, I might have some of that. I just may have learned to manage it. Right? But what I'm telling you is that, again, these institutions have the power to impose on us, right? A lot of those children who they say, you know, have a special ed or whatever, they don't need no special ed. They try to put me in special ed. My grandma said, ain't nothing wrong with that, boy. My mother wasn't going to have that. You know, now I eventually got suspended and ended up, you know, going to prison and everything. But my grandmother wasn't going for that. She knew that I was, you know, I was acting out, I was acting up. The little kids, that's what we do, you know. And so if you have an advocate, like a mother, father, grandmother, parent, community member, you know, we have this African adage that it takes an entire village to raise a child. Once we become the village and we realize that all children are our responsibility, we ain't gonna allow them to be labeled. Because, you know, once you get labeled, everything you do only reinforces the label, right? I mean, you know, if you try to defend it, you say, I told you he was aggressive. And then if you try to say, no, I'm not aggressive, I told you he was over talking. And everything you say, they just go in that DSM manual and they just apply another label on it. You know, you can't get out of it. You're in a tailspin. So, you know, this whole special ed situation to me is a very interesting, because I can almost guarantee you that a bunch of those children that have been labeled special, there ain't nothing wrong with them, boy.
Yeah.
They just need a little more attention and love.
I'm sorry, but we have to move on, so I'd like to thank the panelists and encourage anybody who has any further questions to write it down, hold your ears, don't let it go, and definitely connect with the panelists via websites, emails, grabbing them right after this, and asking your questions, your comments, getting involved. You heard a lot of great tools, definitely take it back. Tell somebody, tell that person to tell somebody, and spread the word.
Don't forget, hashtag S2PP.
Tried as adults in New York State on a court date, getting caught with some weight, trying to put a fork on the plate. No contribution, unless it come with a tax write-off. So young girl prostituting, showing her backside off on a busy strip, opposed to business clothes in a busy world. Products of environments, nothing like Disney World. No Santa Claus coming down the chimney world. Doggy dog, every man for self, stingy world. How many CEOs that were once VPs put same motivation in their corporation and 501c3s? See, Your corporation is your sidekick. You make the best of. But your nonprofit is like your side chick. It get less love. Messed up how they judge us, but all these youth programs suffer from a budget cut. So mask and 4-5 comes before necktie and button up. Much love to single mothers, but we need 2 in the home. It takes 2 like when you on the phone. Nonprofits are positive, but they can't do it alone. One hand can't clap and one man can't make it happen. We all got a part to play. And that job starts today. You've been hired. Now that you're inspired. Interview questions of what the youth inquired. Who will save the babies? The second poem that I'm going to share with you is entitled Order of Removal. Order of Removal, and it's centered around the prison system. Brothers get caught up. Brothers get caught up for the cheese, like a trapped mouse. At 15, he saw his first strap house. At 16, he pulled his first strap out. No home. He found shelter in juvie prisons. DC jail, Rikers Island, new beginnings. Nubians who never knew what royalty felt like. Never wore his belt tight, so besides his pants, his gun was all he held tight. Life on hold, strong soul, who became weak for his wants. I see him once a week, he been sitting for months. I go in to do my poetry workshop. The potency his words got can't be confined by all the police the world got. He told me he worked out. His pop's a boxer. Pictures of Pacquiao on his wall. Just like him, he's powerful but small. How was a social worker supposed to nurture a child's dead spirit, early murder, court order, life a living abortion, born from holy water like the river of Jordan, now a cash cow to a prison who won't give him a portion. I tell him hold his head. Without the army, he's a soldier. At times his arms get too heavy for his shoulder. The burden his mom's carried like a boulder. Every day he's getting older. Just had a birthday. Group programs, he got an A on the survey. Never been dumb, though his literacy level is below sea level. Caught up in the beast, the deep level. Eyes on fire beneath the tea kettle. Now he's 18. Release date dreams. It's about time. Thought he was free till the gatekeepers gave him adult time. When will the bulb shine in this dark hour? In his bloodline is star power, no BET, a smart scholar with no GED, intellects, young Malcolm X in the feds. Like FedEx mail, they shipped him to federal jail. Off to Michigan. Family can't afford to visit him. Recidivism in the prison system is the heartbeat of Wall Street. Private jails create profit sales. Every time we hear the bells on the clock, black males are the stock like slaves on the dock. Now check this. Prison complexes in Texas decrease because of less entries, more exits. The state lost money, so what's next is go after the Mexicans, immigrants all together, arrested guilty and innocent all together. More cellmates to fill more bed space, if not they lose money. More dead weight is called capitalism. That's why we face capital punishment 40 years after imprisoned. For rising stocks rising from collect calls. Leeching the life behind these dead walls in this game of debts and debtors. Some met some mentors. Men torn from the thorns of crooked judges. Nickels a day for cooking lunches. Hundreds of push-ups, hooks and punches. Abundance of prayers and books from pundits. Keep his mind clear, refueled, seeking renewal. In cuffs, he's the jewel in the rough. From the streets where life beyond 18 is iffy. More black men in jail than slaves in 1850. Now seriously, look in the mirror, see, and tell me that's not a conspiracy. Cocaine, the color of white supremacy, while crack rock equal black when the latch lock is frightening. White men doing powder, come home in an hour. Black men rocking the hard place, turn bass into hard rock, sit in San Quentin and Comstock. Every night, he writes from a lonely cell like Etheridge Knight, the poet who married Sonia Sanchez before the death of his life. My brother Troy did 11. Got his life right now, he's a legend, pledging to elevate the state of his brethren. My cousin locked down right now, doing beyond 40, talking like he be home shortly. That's strength at its best. A weight no man can bench press. Not weight as in lifting bars and dumbbell, but weight as in patience living behind bars in some cell. Compelled to kneel, seeking the Lord for approval. Keeping it real, he swore to be truthful. Your Honor, will you appeal this order of removal? Order of removal. Thank you. Wow. So as the sister stated, I've been working with young brothers in Rikers Island. One of my partners, I wouldn't say crime because crime is how you get to Rikers, but one of my partners in the movement, she's also here, Star Patterson, and we've been working with these young brothers on a daily basis to help cut down the recidivism in terms of the rape. The brother said he came to the Island Academy, so we actually work with those brothers at the Island Academy. They recently just split it up, so it's 16 to 18-year-olds, but now they're divided by age categories, so there's 16 and 17-year-olds together, 18-year-olds are separated. But I've been working with these brothers before on Rikers in DC and Baltimore jails. And a friend of mine came home from incarceration, and he began an organization entitled A Glimpse of Paradise. And he was one of the most prolific, powerful brothers, I think, who really encapsulated the experience and transferred a negative into a positive and used his experience as influence to really transform the lives of these young brothers on the inside. So that was my first introduction to the work. And I came in as the artist, because if you know anything about young people, art is very impacting, it's very influential, especially when you could identify and take the language and make it familiar, sound vibrate. So I've been working with these young brothers for about a good 7 years now. And going to school, I went to school for public relations. So when you think about that, coming from the arts business, entertainment circuit, you never know where God leads you, you know? So I think like a lot of the work that I've been doing with these young brothers is not so much profession, but it's by purpose. And I salute all y'all, man, that's in here to do something positive, because we in there with them every day, and they need it, you know? For some of them, you will be the only family they have. You will be the only connection they have in terms of positivity, in terms of light, in terms of direction. So if you got a passion for it, I say just really be about it and keep pushing, you know? It's not a work with big pay for big profit, but it's a work with great purpose in the kingdom of God. So I salute everybody that's pushing forward, doing something great. My name is Messiah. If you'd like to keep up with my work, the website is allmessiah.com. That's ALLMESSIAH. Again, ALLMESSIAH, allmessiah.com. Some of the work I performed today is also on CD. I brought some copies of the CD with me this evening if you'd like to support the artistry as well. God bless you and have a blessed night. Peace.
Thank you all so much for coming. Let's give our panelists another round of applause. So we put this event together as part of our Public Allies program. Public Allies is an organization that works through AmeriCorps, and we are all placed in different organizations throughout the course of 10 months with the focus of going out to the community and using our passions to engage the community in different areas. So some of us are working in schools, some of us are working here at United Way, but then there's a broad spectrum of work that we do throughout the 10 months. But part of our work that we do is organizing an event like this. And we chose the School to Prison Pipeline because it's something that we're all passionate about, and it's something that we feel is an important and pressing issue, especially here in New York. So we very much appreciate you all coming, and taking time out of your Friday evening to be here with us and listen to what our great panelists had to say. And please keep an eye and an ear out for upcoming events that we'll also have from our colleagues that are also in the program. So thank you so much, and you all have a wonderful evening.
We would also like to give a shout out to our program manager,
Yes.
Donna. And have a nice evening.
Yeah.